Chapter 12. B. Are you looking for someone? I froze in place before I ripped my gaze away from the nearly empty kitchen and turned to my sister. Evie frowned, her blue eyes suspicious. You've been watching that doorway. Like you're expecting someone the whole time we've been sitting here. I tried to hide the wince, especially from her. Evelyn was the nosiest of all. As I looked for Will like I did every day. My room kissed me. I would have thought he left if I couldn't still feel. I had no intentions of telling Evie that though. Who knew where she'd run with? Well, she asked, her tone impatient now. Anything more? I was looking for the original werewolf, actually. I haven't seen him in a while. Is he still around? I asked unnecessarily. Evie watched me for a long second before the suspicion in her gaze faded and, yeah, she said slowly. I did. I was working on payroll and I needed to know. I continued to stare at her as she scooped a huge bite of mashed potatoes into a question, and it only confused me more. I guess I could lodge. But mostly he's been working on the farm. That information was a shock to my system. I struggled to keep up with the. I had no idea he was working here, I said slowly. In the morning. Even though I hadn't seen him in so long, that ache in my chest that meant he was near had become comforting to me. The thought that it might be taken away. I hadn't even realized I'd climbed to my feet before Evie grabbed my hand and, with a good enough excuse, at the last second I decided to go with some form. There. For over a week and a half with no success. Evie squeezed my fingers, bringing me back to the conversation. That's so. I forced my lips into a smile. Do you happen to know where I could find? Down in the billiards room a couple times. You could check there. I watched her go for a moment before I glanced down the hallway. With one last. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, I still wasn't sure if I wanted to hurry or take my time. Hell, I wasn't even sure what I was going to say if I been one of the most powerful moments of my life. And now the man who'd shared. Ever figuring out why my chest ached when I was around him. I didn't think something so strong could be one-sided, but maybe it was. Maybe. And hell, that made me even madder. What that meant. I stopped outside the half-open door, giving myself one more moment to breathe. Made my way toward him. Werewolf. There was no way he didn't hear me coming. The anger burned hotter, making my blood pump furiously through my veins. He. Those were the only words I could force past the emotions running wild inside me. I pulled them off the table just before he jabbed the end of his stick into table as he continued to ignore me. I asked you a question. Flying into the pockets. Dugodbis. I watched him take another shot as I struggled to contain my rage. So that's us. I stormed over to where he was lining up another shot and slid myself between window. Forever. His dark green eyes were locked on mine as I watched him struggle with a battle I knew nothing about. Me. His hands gripped my hips as he jerked me closer. You want to know why I? And his hands clenching tighter around me. Breathed deeply. Because I knew if I saw you again I wouldn't want to leave. I stood up straight as I watched him walk around the other side of the table. This didn't make sense. He wasn't telling me the whole truth. There was more. Making you leave. Eyes were so bright as he stared at my pale fingers wrapped around his tan. You don't know what you're saying, he said, his voice deep but soft. I pulled on his arm and he stumbled a step closer. I know you don't have to. You to leave. Second to marvel at his beauty before he dragged me closer. His hand slid. Pulled hard on the dark strands and my head fell backward. Mine. I met his furious gaze without blinking. I stared at his mouth for a moment before I met his stare again. Show me. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second before his lips were on mine. Him. His grip on my ass was almost painful as he dragged me toward the edge of the rough hands explored my body. I let my fingers trace the hard lines of his. With a roar, Will ripped his lips away from mine and took a step back. His. Won't. He took a step back. And then another. His tortured eyes finally met mine for a second before he glanced away again. Just trust me. Please. We can't do. I took a cautious step forward, still not trusting my shaking limbs to hold. Even begin to fathom the life I've lived. The things I've seen. The things. Have more to learn about you than you do about me. In the morning. You're just going to leave this behind? You're just going to walk away from? Will frowned. What? He stared at me hard for a moment. Feel what? My poor heart stopped altogether as realization slowly sunk in. Understand. Save whatever was left of my dignity before I escaped this room. Going next. I spun around to leave but stopped in the middle of the room. Be safe. Chapter 13. Will. Be safe. Her soft words echoed through the room long after she spoke them. Sheer will and thousands of years of practice was I able to conceal my request as I continued my solitary game. However, on the inside, my stomach frothed with bile as my chest ached like someone had ripped open my rib cage. Why couldn't I stop making mistakes with her? What was it about her that made me lose control like this? The questions flowed through my head as I continued my game. I looked up to find Elizabeth, the alpha's mate and my descendant, standing. Hearing her, but that was just a testament to how chaotic my head was. Though she bore me no real resemblance, there was no doubt in my mind that she was a distant part of my family tree. I'd encountered thousands of relatives. I wasn't sure how I was able to tell when someone shared my blood, even if years ago, and much of my bloodline had died out by now. I'm okay, Elizabeth said, breaking me out of my thoughts. I was wondering. Right now, I figured it was the least I could do for my many times great granddaughter. Of course you can. What is it? I figure she'd want to know something about Cleopatra or Shakespeare, but those words sliced through my skin like microscopic razor blades. They mocked. No, they're a gift from the witch. I know they're rare. Wait a second. A gift from the witch? What does that mean? Adopted in recent years and resort back to the violence and destruction I'd been born into. Like the creature of chaos I really was. I looked up just in time to see Elizabeth hurrying across the room. My insides. She'd sought me out for a reason and all I'd done was stand here and sulk. I'm sorry, I asked. It was stupid of me. No. I jerked my head toward a nearby stool and waited for her to take a seat in it. You wanted to know about the witch, right? My hand squeezed the pool stick hard enough to leave imprints of my fingertips. I turned back to the table and lined up another shot, hoping that our agreement. She saw what happened when Adela didn't shift. I looked at her for only a second before turning away. My wife. Of times. Thousands. So why did they feel clunky and awkward now? Pain that came with the guilt. I deserved far worse for all the lives I took. That morning. Same moment I lost my wife. She hadn't been my intended victim, but that didn't change the fact that I'd infected her with this curse. It didn't change the fact that her body couldn't. In and out of humanity over the years, hoping for death. Praying for those were some of my darkest days. Most of the time it felt like I was past them, but I knew they still lived deep inside me. I knew they'd never really left. Those words had lived buried deep inside my head for so long, slowly rotting. I'd searched for so long. Spent hundreds of lifetimes looking for the woman that was meant to finally bring me peace. The one who was supposed to be my. And yet here I still was thousands of years later. Alive and alone. The same. As I'd always been. Nothing would ever change for me. I knew the consequence. Elizabeth froze. She created fated mate so you could die one day? Shrugged and lined up another shot. Essentially. Those words came out tortured, but I couldn't help that. Be free of this world. To finally rest. Now imagine doing that for millennia. Elizabeth stood there blinking at me as I slowly drowned in the hundreds of losses I'd collected in my life. The hundreds of cracks in my heart I knew. I don't know how long we stood there before she finally cleared her throat. I nodded. Essentially, I said again. So what happened? I pressed my lips together hard, not sure if I wanted to laugh at her audacious question or scream my own frustration into the quiet room. Maybe fate wasn't as cruel as we'd been led to believe, and there has never died. But I'd had brief moments of peace in recent weeks, hadn't I? To her talk about her day. During those exhausting hours of training where all that mattered was the strain of my muscles, and her steady heartbeat that was. Before. Watched her leave. Now the last image I had was the way her face fell when I ached because of her and my heart didn't pound just because she was close. I looked away from the door. Haven't found her yet. How is that possible? She asked, her voice soft. Instead, I leaned over the table and channeled my anger into the next shot. I'm not sure, I said as evenly as I could. Maybe it didn't work. Sure, granddaughter. The sentiment was paper thin. Just the smallest reminder. Finished with a huff. From where I stood, I dreaded the next question that would come out of her. Now that was something I'd never been asked before, which perked my. Elizabeth slouched in her seat for a moment, her features pinched with emotion. Before she slid off the stool. Thanks for talking to me, Will. I'll see you. She must have been questioning the alpha's claim that they were fated because she wasn't born a werewolf. Feeling unworthy of a mate was something I was. My past swirled with my present as I stumbled forward a step and gripped the Adela wasn't my mate by magic didn't make her any less mine. My wife's name felt foreign in my mouth, like it didn't belong there. Had never felt less true. Adela may have been the love of my human life, but my thoughts of her, my memories, most of them were gone now. All that remained. She'd follow my advice like I never had. The kind of darkness I'd bring. For her. Because Bea was the kind of woman you fought for. The kind of woman you made. But I'd successfully ruined any chance for that. Which was why it was time to. Thanks, Will. At dinner. She'd asked me a few times to join her for a meal, and I figured this was my. But even as I said those words, I knew I'd chicken out and not go. I knew there. Which meant I'd be eating leftovers out of the fridge once I was sure she was less than appealing. I could hear the occupants of the lodge gathering upstairs in the kitchen, and to sit and talk and laugh with wolves I could call my friends. To live in the nightmare would never let me forget what I did, and I'd never stop paying. And rack the balls before slipping up to the ground floor and out the side door. Stick to 2 legs for the next few hours. I kept to the shadows as I enjoyed the North Carolina summer evening for the didn't know when the next time I'd smell the mountain air mixed with pine. Fridge. I was only halfway through my plate of roast beef and potatoes when I heard a door open and close upstairs. Pound, and I knew I needed to go. Were some of my last few moments in her presence and I was wasting them. When my plate was empty, I set it aside and picked up my latest borrowed book. It was Pride and Prejudice from Callie's collection, and even though I'd read just like everything else I'd found here, as usual, I'd had no intention of sleeping, but the restless nights must have caught up to me because I blinked and the book and sparse room were gone. Find her close by. 4th. My stomach twisted deep inside me as I walked over, knowing what I'd see when the light in the hut was dim, the moon only just rising in the sky as I lifted. Instead of Adela's chocolate brown gaze looking up at me, it was Bea's light blue eyes. They pierced right through my soul as she winced in pain, her body. Bea, I whispered through my numb lips. No. Wolf. A long loud howl of pain ripped from her throat as I watched. Wake up. I just didn't know if I was strong enough to survive that loss. Chapter 16. Bea. Matthias, you're up. The giant enforcer looked around at the other men gathered. With who? Me. His mouth fell open as the wolves around him snickered. Come on, really? He whined. Matthias was easily my biggest enforcer, but he was still no match for me. We both knew it, which was why he didn't want to fight. But my skin had been buzzing with electricity all day, and I needed to get some of this energy out of me. My thoughts drifted to Will like they had continuously since I left his room. This morning. I still couldn't believe how much difference one night could. I'll go easy on you. I lied before I turned around and started stripping. A werewolf, we were all used to nudity, but that didn't mean I had to stand in. As soon as we were both wolves, his deep voice was in my head. I've got it. I rolled my eyes as I danced in place, my paws itching to move. I said I'd go easy on you. He leveled me with a look I had no trouble interpreting, even on a wolf's face. Stalked forward, ready to get this started. Matthias hoofed. Thanks. There was plenty of sarcasm in his response, but I ignored it as I got closer. Race, but I ignored it as the big werewolf crouched into position. I knew he wasn't stupid enough to make the first move against me, so I had to. Matthias kept his form, dark eyes never leaving me as I crept closer. Finally, I dug my paws into the grass and broke into a sprint. I raced toward him as he braced for me, his sharp teeth bared. Side of his body, sending him flying before his large frame hit the ground. Around to watch him climb to his feet. Did you really just fucking donkey kicked me? I barked loud with a laugh. Looks like I did. I laughed again, but my eyes were trained on his careful movements, so when should have kept moving away from his big limbs, but that last missed blow had left his back wide open, and I was feeling reckless enough to take the chance. Matthias was still recovering when I darted forward, teeth bared, and knocked me to the ground. Matthias, never one to forget his training, didn't give me the chance. He spun around and hit me again, this time in the gut, sending all the air rushing. Even through the pain, I was making a contingency plan, ready to get back on. Another wolf came flying out of nowhere and slammed into Matthias, knocking. I'd never seen the wolf before, his markings unfamiliar, but I'd recognize him anywhere. He ignored me as he clawed at Matthias' chest, his growl so menacing my fur stood on end. My enforcer tried to get away, but the original werewolf was unrelenting and so vicious. It was clear already where this was headed. Just like I knew he was going to permanently damage my enforcer if I didn't stop this. I shook off the last few hits I'd taken and grit my teeth before I threw myself into the mix. My body slammed into Will with enough force to knock him off Matthias and for the enforcer to escape. We rolled to a stop with Will on. Smallest trickle of fear for the first time. Before he scanned the crowd, I knew he was looking for Matthias so he could finish what he'd started, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I squeezed my hind legs in between us and kicked with all my might. Will went flying through the air and landed a few feet away with a loud huff. Will, cut it out. What are you doing? Had him pinned. Where is he? Him alone. He didn't do anything wrong. Will's eyes widened. I saw him strike you. I saw him go after you. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he stared at me. I won't allow it. My blood boiled as I saw in his dark eyes how deeply he meant those words. I pushed off him and sprang to my feet. Matthias, I called out. I knew it was only a matter of time before this story made its way. Of them they're dismissed. I want them all out of my sight immediately. I turned back to Will, who'd climbed to his feet but still hadn't taken his twitch, so I knew he was listening. Let's go. I stormed toward the tree line, bumping into his shoulder hard as I passed. Me. My paws easily navigated the woods I'd long ago memorized until I came to my body as I heard him come to a stop behind me. When the change was finished. You had no right to interfere like that. Human legs. You shouldn't be fighting a man 3 times your size. I'm the beta of this pack. The only person I haven't fought and won against. My face heated and my hands shook as I tried to control my voice. He got it. Will threw his hands in the air. It didn't look under control to me. Beatrice. It looked like you were disoriented and he was about to hit you. Many times can you get hit in that hard head of yours before it causes real damage? Oh no? You don't think there's anyone in this pack who'd like your job? Who'd like to take you out and claim your position? My heart squeezed in my chest at the thought. Those were my men. I'd run. Me settled in my gut like a ball of lead. Will darted across the space between us and grabbed my arms, yanking me to his chest. How am I supposed to know that? How am I supposed to trust men I don't? My pulse thundered in my ears. You should trust me and my abilities. I jerked out of his arms and took a couple steps back. You don't, do you? Don't what? I watched him take a deep breath and open his mouth to speak, but at the last, I took another step back. Fine. Then allow me to show you. The magic of my wolf raced through my bones and soon I was standing on 4 legs again. I growled softly as I crouched in preparation. He rolled his eyes. I'm not going to fight you. Choice. I darted forward and swiped a paw at his bare leg. He hissed in pain as blood. I'm still not fighting you, he said between gritted teeth. Even further. With a leap my body collided with his and we both went toppling over. Damage. Will's back made hard impact with the ground, knocking the wind out of him. He ground out. I'm serious. I'm not going to fight you. Just stop. This growled beneath me before the shaking turned into trembling, and I knew I'd won this round. To finish, when he climbed to all 4 paws, his disappointed gaze settled on me. Are you happy now? I won't be happy until you respect me and what I'm capable of. Abilities, and I'm about to make you. He shook his head, but I ignored him as I planned my attack. When I found an opening I took it. Running as fast as I could, I caught him with a swipe of my paw on his shoulder. The guilt was thick as I watched the blood trail through his fur, but he still. I ran at him again, tackling him to the ground this time and hovering over. I'm not going to fight you. Yes, you are. I grit out as I swiped my claws across his chest. The blood welled inside the gashes, but I ignored it too. If I looked too long it made. Finally Will moved, but it was only to flip us over so he was on top of me. His heavy paws pinned me to the dirt, but that didn't stop me from struggling. Trying to goad me into fighting you. With a roar I kicked him off me, his body flying even further this time. He landed with a thud that made my stomach twist deep inside me. It was almost like it hurt me to hurt him, but I couldn't stop. The years and years of being underestimated had built to this, and the person tumbling over. So, you wouldn't let me finish the match with my enforcer, and now you won't Fight me either? Does that mean you've already decided I can't handle myself? Then if you know I can handle myself, why did you interfere today? Because you were losing. I had it under control. You didn't even give me a chance. You just assumed I wasn't good enough or strong enough or fast enough to beat him, and you inserted yourself where you. He took a big step forward, and the look in his eyes made my hackles rise. If you're expecting me to sit back and watch you get hurt, then I'm sorry. No, I'm expecting you to not interfere with my job. Your job is not to get pulverized by the biggest goddamn werewolf in this. I've had worse before, and I'm sure I'll have worse in the future. I'm the beta of this pack, and sometimes that means getting my hands dirty. That's something you need to accept, or this isn't going to work. I stood there, my heart pounding somewhere near my stomach as I waited to see. He took another step forward, until he was close enough for his earthy scent to cloud my head before he shifted back into a man. If you're asking me to stand back and watch you get injured, the answer will always be no. I willed my body back into a woman's. I'm asking you to have some faith in that I didn't get to this position by accident. I fought my ass off for it. And I'm not going to let you come along and disregard all that. Conflicted. How am I to know when you're in control of the situation or when you genuinely need my help? How can you expect me to sit back and watch you? I opened my mouth with a retort locked and loaded, but bit my tongue instead. His words worked their way through the stubborn wall around my brain as I tried to understand his side. I took a deep breath and let it out slow. Okay, how about this? If I'm sparring with someone in this pack, then I don't need your help. Have it out for you. I'm not agreeing to that. I rolled my eyes as I stepped into his space and breathed him in, his scent dousing the small remaining fires of indignation. Okay, how about you don't help me unless I ask for your help? He let out a gust of air as his warm arms circled my back and he dragged me, and listened to his heart pound unevenly. But next time when faster, Chapter 17. Will. Bea, are you up? The hollered words were punctuated by heavy thuds on the door, and we both jerked upright in bed. Bea looked at me, her icy blue eyes wide beneath her messy hair. Bea, I'm coming in. No, she screamed. Bea turned to me. You need to hide, she breathed as she shoved me off her bed. I just barely caught myself before landing on my face. Her head poked over the side of the mattress. Get under the bed, she hissed. I am not crawling beneath your bed, Beatrice. Next the door rattled in its frame, making Bea's heart jump. Bea, none of your damn business, Abraham, she yelled as she scurried off the bed. I really don't care, he said as he shook the door again. Damn it, Abraham, she yelled. What the hell do you want, Abraham? Here. They were both quiet for a minute before Abraham spoke again. I can hear his. What happened? She said some shit about a dead cat. I don't fucking know what's going on. Are you going to fuck off to your mate who actually needs you in there? Sorry about that. Just a lot going on right now. You know I've been busy training my gamma and you're the original werewolf and I'm the beta of this pack. We're kind of I don't like cowering. Precious and numbered. Just like I knew no amount of time with her would be enough. She tilted her head to look at me, but I kept my eyes on the ceiling. I still wouldn't look at her, and I knew she was growing suspicious when I'd been trying to have this conversation for weeks, but every time I did, she'd get upset and I'd let it go. But that wasn't fair to her. The truth was, leave. I let out another deep breath and looked up at the ceiling again. How long? Moment as I braced myself for what I had to say next. This was never meant to. My body moved on autopilot as I sat up and prepared to leave. Bea shook her head, dark hair flying as she climbed onto my lap and, no, you're not leaving. I don't care about having kids. Off me, but the silky skin beneath my palms made me want to linger a moment. Longer. She scooted further back until she hit my throbbing cock and I hissed. She shrugged as she pressed harder, her wetness already leaking onto me. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Please don't ask me to do that. They were more resigned than I'd ever seen them. Okay, she said, softened. You're not leaving today, she hurried to add. Bea scooted closer and wrapped her arms around my neck. I soaked up because I knew this was short-lived. I just didn't know how I was going to. I took a deep breath, letting her settle down deep inside me before I stood up. That sliced to my heart, and I knew I wouldn't be able to take many more. Bea was dressed and ready to face the day while I sat on her bed, ordered to Wait 10 minutes after she left before I made my leave. What's this? Open it, she said. I pulled on the cardboard and shifted the tissue paper aside to reveal a set. New pair, she said, her voice high-pitched and insecure. My chest warmed almost uncomfortably as I stared at the boots, willing my hands not to shake. I hadn't been given a gift in thousands of years. Hadn't been looked after in. Thank you for the new boots. I breathed into her neck as I slid my lips to. Bea's giggle was breathy as her heart continued to strum in her chest. Do you? Okay, because we can get you another color if you want. And I'm not sure if them and you can pick out whatever you want. I pressed my mouth against hers to stop the torrent of words. Bea sighed. But it didn't seem enough. There was so much more I wanted to say, so much more that I felt for her, but Bea leaned up and kissed me again, pulling me from my dark thoughts before she slithered out from underneath me. I really have to get going. I lay down on her bed and listened to her footsteps and heartbeat trail down to my night terrors. The only way to do that was to not sleep when I was with her, which meant long nights of watching her slumber, and I cherished every. The soft sheet smelled so much like her I didn't want to leave. My eyelids creeping in to greet me like it always did. Contorted. No broken bones, no misshapen face. Instead, she was splayed on her back, face slack as she stared unseeing at the. As I got closer, I noticed the dark puddle growing beneath her, and my heart. Even my nightmare was warning me to stay away from her. That I'd only bring her pain. That I'd be the one responsible for her death if I stayed. When the dream finally released me from its clutches, I knew what I. Chapter 18. Bea. That's what you're wearing tonight? I spun around from where I'd been applying makeup at my bathroom sink. Will stood in the doorway, his big body taking up so much space I wondered how I'd missed him. My free hand wandered to my chest as my heart thumped unevenly. What the hell, Will? I looked behind him to see my bedroom window wide open. I'd been leaving it unlocked because Will had a habit of sneaking into my room at night. Convinced him to use the window. No issues using it. Will's eyes hadn't stopped roaming my body since I'd turned, and it was. I squeezed my legs together as discreetly as I could. What was the question? Again. He shook his head as his hands found my waist and he tugged me closer. You. Remarks you're using it for now. Yes, I whispered finally. He unzipped his pants and lifted me onto the bathroom counter. As for you. To you. You remember what's waiting here for you. I'm going to make sure you always. Orgasm overtook me. It was so powerful all I could do was whimper as he. When I finally had nothing left to give, I sagged against his chest entirely. Smoothed out my dress. You didn't enjoy yourself? He asked. I didn't say that. Had to look away or I'd never leave. But you didn't have to mark me like you're. My heart jumped in my chest, and I turned to see his grin widen. Will I? Well. Fit one more in Abby's truck if you want to come, I offered. You. I knew what he was asking, I just didn't know how to answer. He was. We tell them tomorrow. Together. He continued to watch me for a long minute before the most beautiful smile broke across his face. Okay. Will took a seat on my bed. I thought I'd wait for you here. For me here. Callie was getting shrill, and I knew I needed to leave, but the sight of Will leaned down and pressed my lips against his hard for a moment before pulling. He rolled his eyes. I could never. Couple centuries? Manage. I'll see you later, I said as I backed toward the door. We're on. Lectured as she caught up to me. You know if there's one of us that's going to make us late, it won't be me. You guys ready? Callie asked as we stepped inside the hall with Will, wondering what the hell we were really doing. And he began. First, it wasn't really them I was hiding this from. Sure, they'd be nosy and annoying, but I could handle that. Irritation swirling in my gaze. I still hadn't forgiven him for the bullshit. He'd done it with plenty of boyfriends in the past. And I'll be getting behind you later, my brother murmured to his mate. Knew my old irritation with him would only mix with the new and create. Focusing on Dal. Of me yearned to go back to him, but I didn't. Dal needed me more than he did. We loaded into Abby's pickup truck, and I spent the drive scrolling through my week, and a beer sounds good. I was thankful when she nodded and looked away, seemingly accepting my. So, Abby said you threw a fit when he assigned Wyatt to guard Elle. He and his brother Wes had been in our pack less than a year, but they'd been an asset ever since. I couldn't imagine what Callie's problem. Unless of course there was more to the story. Me. Hidden anymore. Sounds like you've got something personal against Wyatt. Building. My shoulders tensed as I turned to her. What do you know about that? I asked, cautiously. She shrugged again, a smile pulling at her lips. I didn't want to interrupt. Matter of time until it was a full-blown pileup. Shit. That's the one. Words only squeaking a little. I shrugged as I looked around for a way out of this. Really? That's weird. Callie. Hey, I've got to run to the bathroom. Could you order me a Stella? Please. Thanks. I called as I hurried away from her. But why were we telling my family when this wasn't permanent between us? I certainly didn't need to add to the reputation I'd already earned myself. Another notch on my bedpost, and eventually I'd be nothing at all to him. Chapter 19. B. Hey, I yelled as I yanked my arm free. I looked up to find a human with glassy eyes and a dangerous smirk on his face. Don't worry, princess. I'm a good guy, he slurred as he reached for me. Again. I sidestepped him easily and turned to leave. Go to hell. Because he was a human and clearly intoxicated, I didn't see any harm in turning my back on him and walking away. But that was a mistake. Waist and the other over my chest before he pulled me back behind a booming. Now that wasn't nice, he whispered in my ear. Stronger than he looked, and that clearly wasn't going to cut it. Would reveal how much stronger I was than a normal human woman, and that. The man squeezed tighter and dug his greasy face into my neck, his arms, clumsy, to my breast. That was when I'd officially had enough. I didn't care if this guy got the full force of my strength because but I didn't get the chance. The neck. The man's brutal hands dropped me in favor of pulling at the arm. I caught my balance and spun around, but I already knew who it was. Will. I hissed as I hurried over to them. Let him go. On you, he snarled. The irritation was rising in my system as people started to gather around us. Will's expression contorted with fury. You were in control as he groped you? Is that what you're telling me, Beatrice? Without oxygen. I knew it was only a matter of moments before he was. Which meant now I had to go up against an angry werewolf to save the man who'd just tried to assault me. To kill him. The original werewolf continued to stare at me, his chest heaving and his hand still squeezing the human's throat. I could see I wasn't getting through to him. The haze of anger in his eyes was as thick as ever as he stared at me. Unseeing. Words weren't. Will looked down at my fingers wrapped around his arm and closed his eyes. With a deep growl, he tossed the human away and took a step back. Going on here? Conflict. I threw myself between him and the security guard. That man tried to assault me, I said, pointing to the human gasping on the floor. Me. Are you all right? Do you want to file a complaint? Go away. I left the human authority to deal with the man as I dragged Will away. He wasn't moving very fast, but he was at least moving, so I wasn't going to complain. It was almost pitch black, but neither of us had any trouble seeing. Will's shoulders were still rising and falling with his rapid breaths. Eyes. I'm fine. His eyes flared as they trailed down my body. Did he hurt you? I said I'm fine, I repeated, my irritation swimming to the surface. And, what the hell are you doing here? Hearts. I got a ride with some guys from the farm. I wanted to surprise you. My pulse raced faster, the anger mixing with the pure happiness that came from. But not happy, he concluded a moment later. Just killed someone. His eyes flashed with something I couldn't name before his rage was back. He had his hands on you. You don't kill people for that. Will rolled his eyes. I wasn't going to kill him. Oh, so you were only going to strangle him unconscious? Do you think that's? In the blink of an eye, Will crossed the distance between us and grabbed my hips, dragging me to him. One of his hands crept up my body to grip my jaw. He's just a drunk asshole who got handsy in a bar. His green eyes burned hotter, the gold flecks almost glowing as he squeezed my isn't his. He spat between his gritted teeth. Will yanked my hips closer, pressing his hard length into me. He tried to take what's mine. My heart pounded in the back of my throat as I stared into his eyes, reading. Yes, mine, he growled before our lips crashed together. Held on and tried to keep up as my stomach erupted in butterflies and my legs shook beneath me. In a movement too quick to follow, he spun me around and gripped me from behind. One hand slid between my legs while the other wrapped around my throat. Will groaned against my neck. Fuck, you're already wet for me. As I struggled to stay upright, he pulled out and cupped me in his big hand. This is mine. His other hand tipped my face back to meet his. You are mine and I'm never. One of his hands left me to pull down his zipper, and even though I tipped my head back further. And when you leave, what then? I challenged him. Will froze for a moment before he growled and bent me forward against a shelf. The intrusion, my orgasm already brewing deep inside. This will always be mine, he snarled as he pounded into me. Will wrapped his long fingers around my neck and pulled me back against him again. You will always be mine. The same hand that had almost crushed a human's larynx earlier now tenderly gripped my throat, exerting the smallest amount of pressure, just enough for me to feel completely at his mercy. It was exhilarating and terrifying and, you are so tight, he murmured against the side of my face. So fucking. His free hand snaked down my body to press between my legs and my entire world shattered around me. A hoarse cry fell from my lips as I had one of the most powerful orgasms of my life. My legs gave out and only Will's hands kept me upright as he continued to slam into me. He groaned against the back of my neck a moment later, and he came to as to keep me pressed against him. But despite that being some of the hottest sex of my life, I was still pissed. So as soon as I was able, I stood up straight and pulled away from him. My body mourned the loss of his, but I fixed my clothes and walked away anyway. Where are you going? He called after me as I reached the door. Confused as his voice, I'd never leave. I need to get back to my sisters. Turned the handle but paused before I could pull it open. And you need to. Before he could answer, I swung the door open and raced through it. I didn't stop until I found Callie, but it seemed she was in a hurry to get somewhere. I don't have to tell you shit. I spotted her pitch black hair easily. It was Peyton, my ex-best friend. What are you doing, Peyton? I asked. She turned her furious black eyes toward me, and I noticed for the first time how bad she was shaking. What are you doing? I thought you hated her just as everything up put her through, so I just shook my head. She's not the enemy, Peyton, and I had no reason to dislike her. She's a great wolf and I'm happy to call her my friend. Can't you see what she's doing to our pack? Can't you see she's ruined everything? Peyton screeched. It's not your pack anymore. Her usually pale face darkened with her fury as her whole body quaked. And friendship mean when I needed you the most? Each word out of her mouth was like a knife to my chest. I'd never wanted Peyton to be excommunicated. I tried for months to get her to understand what kind of road she was headed down, and she wouldn't listen. I'd gone along with her hatred of Ellie. Hell, I'd instigated half of the shit she pulled. I was just as much to blame for her removal from our pack, but instead of accepting the blame for her part in this, she'd decided to. Too bad for her. I was officially done taking people's shit today. You brought this on yourself, I said. I told you to leave it alone. To leave Ellie alone, and you wouldn't listen. You got yourself excommunicated. Peyton's head fell back with a laugh that made my skin crawl. Accept the consequences of my actions? Here's some acceptance for you. Pretty soon you like it was taken from me. I'd heard her throw insults and threats around before, but never like this. What could she possibly be involved with that would destroy the Asheville pack? What kind of force could she be working with strong enough to do something like that? Don't cross me and get away with it. If I can't be a part of the McCoy pack, then I'll make sure there is no McCoy pack. My brother and I advanced on her, our steps synchronized after years of working together. Peyton shrugged. More like a warning. You really don't deserve one, but I guess I still have a soft spot for you. In an instant, her pleasant mask slipped, and her true self shone through. Her face was pinched in anger, cheeks flushed with fury. War is coming to your watch as everything you love is ripped away from you. Then maybe we'll be even. I was ready to attack before she'd even finished speaking. Peyton, get the fuck out of here. I figured 10 years of friendship earned her one warning. But that was all. Peyton's mask fell back into place, her expression bland. Don't say you weren't warned. See you all soon. I watched her closely as she turned and disappeared into the swell of people. Roared, and my sister's voice floated through the speakers. Spot I'd been watching. Before I could hear anything else from her, Abraham wrapped his arm around my waist and tugged me into a huddle with the rest of them. We all need to seriously discuss everything Peyton just said, but for now we need to shelve it and support Delaware. As soon as her show is over, we're all getting out of here and reconvening at the lodge. Got it? trying to pay attention to my sister's show, but a million plans raced through my head instead. Abraham would have to leave to find us alive sooner than we'd anticipated, which meant more responsibilities would fall on my head. We'd also have a surplus of werewolves showing up at the lodge, and I'd be in. All of that was on top of whatever the hell was going on with Will. I decided on the drive home that he wasn't a problem I wanted to deal with tonight. So, as soon as we got back to the lodge and I had a minute to sneak up to my room, I made sure to lock my window and draw the blinds. Her company. I'm not sure I would be able to sit here and listen to him try to get in and not unlock it for him. Or maybe this night apart would help me finally let him go. Chapter 20. Will. What the hell are you doing here? Bea gasped as she swung her bedroom door open. I'd gotten a ride home from the venue and come up here to find her room empty. I hadn't left since. I was waiting for you. She closed the door behind her and spun back around, her eyes like blue fire. How did you even get in here? I locked the window. I rolled my eyes. Knew she didn't want that right now, so I stayed where I was. Finally she. Legs itching to carry me to her. I'm fine. Prepared. We're severely outnumbered. And now our alpha has had to leave too. Whispered. Into my embrace. I kissed her head and pulled away. I stayed with a few packs in South. Second of all, I know I told you to not help me unless I ask for it. Shouldn't have, and that gave him an opportunity to cop a feel. It's not that. Yes, I'd interfered in a situation she could have handled. I held my arms out wide. What did you expect me to do, Beatrice? Just hope. Words. Be pulled out of my grip with ease, reminding me just how capable she really. Ever be a time when I could just watch while you were in trouble? I asked. Was moments away from being over. That's exactly it. I could have handled. Lips. But I don't like fighting with you. When I was finally able to drag my mouth away from hers, I said, letting you. Tank top. Was firm as I gripped it tight, her little gasp making my dick ache. I'll have to eventually, I murmured against her throat, taking the time to. Her eyes again. Soon, all our clothes were gone, and we were beneath the hot spray of water. Soon. I knew without a doubt I was in love with her. Just like I knew the longer I. How could I not? Send me right back to that dark place that lived in my mind. The place I'd. Even though I knew the kind of hell that awaited me, it didn't scare me half. Wrapped her in a big white towel. She looked up at me, her bright blue eyes. Together, it had been acceptable for me to leave. But now, knowing it was more. Well. Into my mind. I looked up to find her hovering above where I sat on her bed, pink lips. Bea stopped her retreat inside. Listen, I know I said we'd tell them. She shrugged as she took another step away from me. Would you prefer filling? Just call it a pants-off dance-off. I didn't miss the anxious tone of her voice. Like she really needed this. Not yet anyway. Chapter 21. Bea. I knew you wouldn't last the week. My older brother shot me a look. Abraham got back from his trip a couple days ago, but this was the first time we'd been able to sit down and catch up. Away from his mate longer, just amused. Evie was the only one who thought you'd make it. Del said you wouldn't last the night, I continued. Better anytime soon. Okay, what's up? They do what's asked of them. They stay out of trouble. They aren't all in. There are a couple men that aren't playing as nice as the others. Who? We can't afford to send away good enforcers. But they're not good enforcers. They're mouthy assholes who are getting on my heart jackknifed in my chest, but I kept my face smooth. Not really. Not suspicious at all. Bit my lips to keep more words from spilling out of them. Before. No. I haven't asked him about that. As if I didn't know exactly where to find him every night. His brows rose. Oh. He said something about South Carolina and Georgia, but I didn't ask for Carolina. Charlotte isn't far from their border and Conrad might have watchful gaze. His voice reached me again when I was halfway across his. Be the one to go get Nana, but that didn't mean I had to like it. My heart warmed in my chest. Getting my grandma away from Uncle Conrad's clutches would take a heavy load off all of us. That would be great. I turned to see the sappiest expression on my brother's face and knew it was. Sure, they noticed when I quietly backed out of the room. Finding my mate one day. Guard. My thoughts turned to him like they always did. Anxious energy zipped along. Every day seemed to get better, easier, more natural. But I knew every night. Inside. I tilted my head. And he groaned in appreciation. I was actually supposed to. He laughed again. Not on me, no. I frowned at his answer, my cloudy brain making it hard to think. Will's hands. I'll keep my hands to myself. He stood up straight, arms falling to his sides. I have finally. I'm sorry. Is that the South Carolina pack? He nodded. You're willing. Hips immediately. But will it make you happy? He whispered against the side. Will pulled my lips to his. Good, he murmured before he kissed me. Voice rough. Oh. Will straightened up, the lust in his eyes fading by the second. I'll let you go then. Think we both knew the truth. Without another glance, I yanked the door open a crack and slid through. Callie did. Big girl. It was so hard to keep a straight face, but I somehow managed until she moved. Door was closed, but that meant nothing. When my brother and Ellie turned down. Beating. Said. Sleeping with for a month? Was relieved to find the only available seat was at the opposite end of the exception. She carried the conversation in the room easily as we all filled up. Kept my eyes on my plate but heard someone picking up the ceramic dish. Thank. Dinner roll. I always hear you call an Ellie granddaughter, but you call the. His gaze darted to me and I looked back down at my plate. He was quiet for it. Where? How many? With who? I knew he'd been with other women. Of course he had. He was thousands of years. Each of his words was like a knife to my gut. My insides twisted and turned. Chapter 22. Will. Who's next? Bea barked from the front of the crowd. I made my way through the sweaty men to stand before her. I haven't gone. Yet. Bea's eyes darted to mine, but she looked away so fast I might have been mistaken. Who else hasn't gone? She called. I continued to stare, soaking up as much of her as I could. Over a month since she'd locked her window and closed her blinds. At even. Roger. Have either of you raced today? Bea yelled toward the back of. If I could hear their cursing and complaining, I knew she could too, but she said nothing as the two Greenville enforcers made their way to the front of the group. Mine and everyone else's gaze swung to Bea, who stood there, the picture of calm. No, one of you will race me and one will race him, she said, pointing. I didn't miss how she avoided saying my name. In fact, despite the fact that I'd shown up to every one of her training sessions for weeks, she'd still her in all this time. Why the fuck can't we just race each other? The other one, Roger, said next. My hands fisted at his tone, but I stayed where I was. For now. Bea leveled him with a glare that I'd hate to be on the receiving end of. The two men shot each other bored looks as they broke apart, and the short one walked up to the starting line. I took one more glance at Bea, proud of how calm she still was before I joined him. I nodded, digging my sneaker into the grass beneath me. We both took off at breakneck speeds, reaching the first line of our suicide sprint in seconds. The two of us were still tied as we raced back to the starting point, but halfway to the second line he started to fall behind. Robbie came to a stop near me, his chest heaving. Figuring she'd been addressing me, I answered. Thanks. She'd heard me. Roger, she called. Let's go. The large enforcer cursed again as he took his time reaching the starting line. Wes, Bea said next as she pretended not to notice the other man's attitude. What's up? You're in charge of this race. As he got into position. Ready? Wes asked. They both nodded, and he spoke again. 1, 2, 3. Go. Roger and Bea took off, kicking up clods of grass in their haste. I watched, and agile as she pumped her long legs and slowly gained distance from her. My gaze drifted to Roger as his face contorted in anger, and he started to veer off course. All my limbs tensed as I watched his big body hurtle toward Bea's. She reached, barreling toward her. Bea jumped out of the way at the last second, costing her precious seconds. Face morphing into satisfaction. But with a growl, Bea ran even faster. Bea wins, Wes yelled as the two slowed to a stop. Around to face him. My body lurched in their direction, and only a massive amount of self. Bea tossed his hand back at him. What are you talking about? You fucking cheated and you cost me the race. You almost ran into me. Bea stood her ground. Stand down, Morrison. This isn't a fight you want to have. Her tone was calm, but I could see the tension running through her. She was done. I found Bea and Roger in a standoff, both of them already wolves. Shit, I'm going to end it and then I'm going to send your sorry ass back to. Roger crouched, his hackles straight up. And what happens if I win? Do I get to be the useless bitch beta of this pack then? Aiming right for her. He missed, of course, but that didn't stop me from retaliating. Sprawling. He jumped to his feet with a snarl, just as Bea's voice reached me. I ignored her as I stared down the threat. "Get out of here!" she roared in my head, but I still didn't listen. Crowd. And because Bea was so focused on me, she didn't see Robbie leaping. His big body landed on her, knocking them both to the ground. Thankfully His claws dug into my side and I just barely held back a cry of surprise. Could feel the blood dripping from my fur, but I ignored it as I turned back. To my opponent. I'd stood there indecisive long enough for Roger to mount another attack. Fortunately, I saw this one coming. He charged at me again, but this time I was ready and met him head-on. Roger. I sidestepped his advance and swiped a paw at his legs. One snapped right away. As he fell to the ground with a loud thud. With him down, I looked back toward 2. With another swing of my powerful paw, I broke his other hind leg and he collapsed with a howl. Without sparing him another glance, I raced over to Bea just as she caught Robbie's throat in her jaws. "Stand down," she snarled, but Robbie continued to thrash. Bea shook her head, crimson spraying from his neck as she bit down harder. I said stand down. An off-kilter step. I rushed to her side. "Are you okay?" She wouldn't look at me as she limped back another step and shifted into A. From all the other eyes in the field. Ground. "Wes, you and some other men escort these two to their rooms to get their things and then to their car." She turned to the men still writhing on the ground. "Neither of you are ever welcome here again, and if you do wander back." Asheville enforcers jumped into action. They hauled the injured men off the. I turned back to Bea as the crowd dispersed just in time to watch her lift one leg in the air and try to stretch it. My heart sank as my body shifted back into a man, and I hurried over. "Are you?" I could hear her teeth grinding, but she wouldn't look at me. "I'm fine," she said as she turned away. Bent to inspect her leg. "Where does it hurt?" I sighed as I felt along her knee and then down to her foot. She tried to pull away, but I held on as I touched her ankle. Bea hissed in pain and my stomach cramped inside me. "Document." She yanked her arm out of my grip. "I don't need to see the doctor." "You might have broken your ankle," I argued. "It might need to be set." "You know what I need is for you to stay out of my business so I don't get injured. In the first place." She limped forward, hands fisted at her sides like she was only just preventing herself from hitting me. "I had that fight under control and I was so focused on you interrupting my fight I didn't notice the other asshole until he hit me." "I was helping you," I said between gritted teeth. "It was 2 against 1. "Not at first, it wasn't. It was just me and one of those douchebags and you still didn't even give me a chance." She hobbled forward another step, her face so beautiful and terrifying. "I expect you to have some respect and let me handle my own fight." "Respect?" I snarled. "You think this is about respect? Underestimating me, and every time you insert yourself into situations that I can handle myself, you're proving just how little respect you have for me. And this time I got hurt because of it." Swallow them down, but they were stuck in my throat. All I'd wanted to do was protect her, and instead I was the reason she was hurt. Gaze and held it as best I could. "I'm sorry." She stared at me for a moment, the pain and mistrust swirling in her blue eyes. Before she looked away. "Whatever," she muttered before she turned toward the lodge. "Whoa, where are you going?" "Inside," she spat. "You need to go see the doc. And I told you that you need to get checked out." "Let's go," I said as I scooped her into my arms. Bea immediately began to squirm, and I almost dropped her. "Put me down," she seethed. "I'm taking you to the doctor." Time I did drop her. To help her, she was climbing to her one good foot, her face bright red with anger. "You're still not fucking listening to me."
Ich frownte her.
"What are you talking about?" She limped forward a step, her face creasing with pain as she did. "I told you. I didn't want to go to the doctor, and instead of respecting my wishes you tried to pick me up and take me there anyway. I have news for you, will you?" I knew she was right, but that didn't change the facts. "Beatrice, you're injured. You are not a medical doctor and you don't have the qualifications to diagnose yourself. Maybe I'm an overbearing dickhead, but you're stubborn." Her eyes burned bright, nostrils flaring as she stared me down, and honestly, it took everything in me not to fidget. Finally, when she spoke, it was not what I'd been expecting at all. "Then Doc can wrap it so you can walk on it. Let's go." I held out my arm for her, but she chose to hobble past me instead. "I don't With a roll of my eyes I followed her, desperately trying to keep my gaze on the back of her head. "And I don't need you to come with me," she said over her shoulder, but the gave out. I caught her in time and didn't let go. "Will you please let me help you?" "There?" I asked. I wasted no time wrapping my arm around her shoulders and supporting most of her weight. The sound of her teeth grinding in irritation almost made me smile, but the events of the day prevented that. Bea was hurt. Something I'd never wanted to happen. Something I'd thought I was helping to prevent. Instead, I'd interfered where I wasn't needed, and then to make first asshole, I would have been able to catch the second one before he got a shot at her. That's what I should have been doing all this time. Not stepping in for her, but flanking her. Bea was right. She was a force to be reckoned with, and I'd been foolishly trying to get in the way of that. But as I chanced to glance at her now, I realized I'd never allowed her to show me her full potential. I'd been too busy trying to stifle her to really see. Thankfully, he'd had extra scrubs for us to change into, so I didn't have to. When they returned with a confirmed sprain diagnosis, I tried to ignore her knowing look. When I stood and offered her my arm, she shook her head. "Doc says I can walk on my own if I keep this cast on." "You can take it off before bed," Doc added. "You should be fine well before." I swallowed hard and let my arm drop. "Okay, let's go." I left the little house ahead of her, desperate for some fresh fall air. Could help, knowing I could make it better if she let me. But she didn't want that, and if nothing else I could do as she asked. I slowed down once I made it to the gravel drive leading to the lodge and kept beneath our feet, almost deafening in the silence. "How are the Georgia wolves doing?" I finally asked, desperate to end the quiet. "They've been great," she said, eyes on the ground. "Thanks again for getting them here." "Of course." My voice was perhaps a touch too emotional for this lighthearted conversation, but it couldn't be helped. "Soul." She soothed wounds she'd never be able to see just by being her. And what had I done? Disrespected her, embarrassed her, undermined her, and worse, I got her hurt. Which meant no matter how good it felt to be near Bea, no matter how much I missed her, the distance she'd created between us was a good thing. I didn't think I could get any closer to her and ever possibly leave the bottom as she carefully climbed the steps. "See you around," she said over her shoulder, her pace never slowing. Answered, even though I knew that wouldn't be true for long. Chapter 23. Bea. "Could I have this dance?" "Dean." I looked up to find Will with his hand extended toward me. I'd seen him briefly before he walked Ellie down the aisle, but I'd done my hair combed. Someone cleared their throat behind me, and I turned to find the table full of. Seemed I wasn't getting out of this dance. Will pulled me to my feet and I stumbled into his arms. He caught me back to his chest. Baseline, and my heart leapt to the back of my throat. I followed him into the crowd, willing my heart to slow and my hands to stop shaking. He finally found us a spot on the dance floor, and instead of pulling me back into his arms, he came to me. Will's hand slid to the middle of my. Desperately tried to calm myself and get through this dance. I could keep my. I glanced down at my tight white dress and shrugged. Evie picked it out. Then she has great taste. You're breathtaking. More moments. There was no tomorrow, where all that mattered was the next kiss, the next touch. But I couldn't do that. Enough to catch me. The music was still playing, but I was done dancing. I pulled away from him. I took a deep breath before responding. "I mean, what are we doing dancing? Distance for weeks, but tonight I finally caved." "You look so beautiful." I shook my head and looked away. "Will, we shouldn't be doing this. You're leaving." "I'm not leaving today," he said, the smile clear in his voice. "Can't." His expression fell as he dragged me closer still. "Listen, I'm not leaving. You're safe." His desire to protect me over and over. I pulled away again, this time not stopping until I was out of his reach. "I appreciate you sticking around to help us." I held up a hand before he could say anything else. "Let's just leave it at." I watched. "So that's it." I took another step back, my heart breaking with every inch that separated us. Reflected in his face. Protect it. But maybe I was too late. Maybe I'd already given him too much. Now the only thing left to do was keep my chin up and pretend like I wasn't walking away from the only man I'd ever loved. Will. The basement. My eyes jumped to Bea as she started giving out orders. I stood with the rest. Them to get to Abraham and Ellie now. They're in the cabin northwest of here. Go now. Due south. Tanner caught their scent on patrol and relayed it to me. She nodded, her expression hardening. All right, men, we've trained for this. Route to the lodge. You do not let a single wolf past you. Guatuyer. We're going to meet them head on. Let's go. Realized she was planning on heading into this fight without me. Before I... Away again. I'm coming with you. I reeled back at her cold tone. Bea, I'm not letting you run onto the... She straightened up. You know what? I think it would be best if you hung back. Staying behind. You can't ask me to sit here and wait while you're out there. Lodge. Insisted. Bea's eyes flared bright blue, and I almost stumbled back a step. Do you? I can't afford to have you in battle with me when you don't have any. Us killed. Sensing my defeat, she took a step back. You're one of the best fighters we have. I'm trusting you to keep this pack safe. Please do this for me. She was asking now for the same thing she'd been begging for since the... She took another tentative step back, like she was afraid I'd change my mind and charge her. Finally, she spun around and started running, her body already. I followed her onto the back patio and watched as she and another 24 her, to make sure nothing ever happened to her. So as the rest of the pack started hurrying inside the lodge, I shifted into my wolf and found a place to keep watch. I figured I owed it to her to obey. I just had to hope nothing happened while I was so far away. Callie. Realized something was wrong. Bea's sister Callie was sprawled across the ground, writhing in pain. Finally, she crawled to her feet, shook out her coat, and took off running. That was the first sign we had that there was trouble. My best to tune into that thing that had always been between me and Bea. That thing that let me know she was near. That thing that let me know she was okay. I dug as deep as I could and held onto it, letting it reassure me that she was trying to change that. It wasn't until a deep anguish flooded my system that I finally moved. Stumbled forward a couple steps as this acute heartbreak almost brought me to the ground. In millennia. But I didn't. If I'd thought it was hard to hold my ground earlier, it was nothing compared to now. Surrendered, I still didn't move. Her sadness still dripped thick through my system, but finally I heard her heartbeat and she broke through the tree line. Bea shifted back into a woman and shrugged on an oversized t-shirt handed to, collected from the woods and brought to the dock. I shifted back and followed the group of healthy enforcers into the forest to carry one man each. When we finally got them all back to the doctor's house, he was nowhere to be found. Where is the doctor? I asked as I set down the man I'd been carrying. Abraham looked up, his expression grim. He's got Wyatt in surgery right now. We don't know how long they'll be. Show me where they keep supplies, I can help. I've had some medical training. I spent the rest of the night tending to broken bones and lacerations as my feeling rumen took over for us. By then the number of untreated wolves had severely diminished and the doc insisted we leave. Abraham and Ellie took off hand in hand for the lodge as I hung back. This was it. Bea was safe again. Here. With a heavy sigh, I shuffled back up to the lodge, not in any hurry to get. Only thing I could have ever really called mine was Bea, and she was the one. I just made it to my room when a wave of grief washed over me so strong her torment beat against my insides, slicing me open and filling my wounds. I stumbled out of my room and over to the staircase. Taking 2 steps at a time, I raced to the 3rd floor. I knew I had to get to Bea. I had to help. I made it to her door and stared at the handle, the last dozen or more times. I didn't know, but it didn't matter because the moment I twisted the knob, until I heard her muffled sob that Chapter 24. Bea. Were too thick to see through, but it didn't matter. I'd recognize his voice, his scent, the beat of his heart anywhere. Will, I breathed. He stepped into the bathroom with me and closed the door behind him. What are you doing? Beneath my fingernails. Blood that wasn't mine. Her blood on me, I whimpered. Will walked over and picked up my hands. Then let's wash up. I looked at him, my tears relentless. It's everywhere. His soft green eyes stared at me for a minute before he sighed. Let's get you. His words flowed over and around me but didn't stick. I nodded anyway and he walked away. Price. Now that the threat from Charlotte was past, he could leave at any time. Bea, he called. I turned to find him standing next to the running shower, his expression so. And I knew I should get in. Knew that I needed to wash this day off in the worst way. But something stopped me. It felt like I was being held together by the thinnest of threads, like I closed my eyes and squeezed my fists tighter as I called on the last reserves of strength I had to move from this spot. Stood fully clothed in front of Will, not sure what was supposed to come next. His eyes darkened and he cleared his throat. "I'll leave you to it, Will," mumbled before he walked away. Retreating heartbeat. Was this it? Was this the last time I'd ever see him? Was he leaving for good now? Wrenched from my chest. It was too much. I was losing too much in one day. "Bea." I turned to him, my eyes cloudy with tears again. "Please don't go," I whispered. "Please. Just for tonight." Just couldn't stand the thought of facing this night by myself. Not with the nightmares already dancing in my head. Front of me. Will picked up my hands again and squeezed. "Of course I'll stay." They'd help battle the demons inside me, but I should have known better. Nothing could stop them. Nothing could make this better. Another cry worked its way up my throat, and I almost choked on it. I had to do it, I croaked. I had to kill her. The words just barely made it past my. Will slid his hands up my biceps. "This was war today, Bea. You did what you." I shook my head. He didn't understand. I didn't kill her in battle. My whole body was trembling, and I'd never been colder in my life. But then I looked down at Peyton's blood still beneath my fingernails and remembered she was somewhere out there even colder. My mind, and suddenly it was all I could see. Another sob caught me by surprise as my knees buckled. Today. Too ashamed to meet his eyes, I stared at his shirt as I spoke. The real reason Charlotte attacked was to distract us from my uncle's plot to kill Ellie. We'd thought she'd be safe at the cabin with Wyatt watching her, but his thick fingers grasped my chin and lifted my face. "Your friend, Peyton?" "My friend. I killed my friend. She was my best friend." "But she was going to kill Elizabeth," he argued. I shrugged. "That's what Conrad said. And when I got to them, Wyatt had time," I added, my voice breaking. I finally looked up, needing to read the truth there in his eyes as I spoke. But maybe there was another way. Maybe I could have broken her spine like I cried harder. Will shook his head. "This is the same woman who tried to kill Elizabeth once before." I held his gaze for as long as I could before I looked away. "Yeah, she was. This is the same woman who poisoned a cat to hurt Elizabeth?" I nodded. "She'd done that too. In fact, she'd done and said a lot of shitty choice. And it's not like I just ended a stranger's life. I killed the girl I'd been friends with since I was in grade school. We'd been as close as sisters. At one point, my knees buckled again, but Will still hadn't let go of me. I hung my head and cried, the loud sobs ringing through the bathroom. I felt pain. "Bea," Will said as he squeezed my arms tighter. "You did what you had to do." Peyton signed her fate the moment she chose to seek out Elizabeth. Phew. Hadn't stopped her, she might have killed Elizabeth, which would have also. I shook my head, the tears dripping onto the floor between us. But I didn't even try to incapacitate her first. I showed more mercy to the enforcers from Charlotte that I'd never met than I did to my best friend. What kind of person? Will tilted my face to his again, and I saw the determination in his gaze. "You'd let this woman go. She would have found another way to hurt Elizabeth. And you might not have been there to protect her that time." I pulled out of his hold. "No. I chose to kill her, and that's always going to be on me. Everyone knows I'm the only one who took a life today. Bea, no one is blaming you for what you did." Stares when they didn't think I was paying attention. "This whole pack hates me. Now, even Abraham looks at me different," I said, my voice cracking and failing me. Will shook his head and moved closer again. "No one hates you, Beatrice. Them. I love you." My whole world ground to a halt as I stared at his mouth, wondering if I'd what? I asked, my voice breaking with the force of my emotions. Will caught my eyes and held them as he eliminated the remaining distance between us, cupping my face in his big hand. "I love you." Of me, heeding them and making them better. I never knew 3 little words could have that kind of power, but they did. Be turned inside out from the sheer magnitude of bliss. Will was all I'd ever wanted, and he loved me. He was standing right there in the center of the darkest storm of my life, telling me he loved me. And yet, despite all that, I still wouldn't get to keep. Chapter 25. Him. But if all I had was this one night, if all I had were whispered words of love and not a lifetime of bold declarations, I'd take it. Hell, if all I had were minutes, I'd take those too. I pressed my cheek harder into his palm as the first storm cloud began to dissipate. I've been told I'm not easy to love. Will smiled, his expression so soft as he cradled my face between both hands. And leaned in close. It's the easiest thing I've ever done. He pressed his lips against mine, and it felt like the sun was somehow shining. Again, this kiss was slow and luxurious, like it wasn't one of the last ones, but one of thousands we get to share. Will started pulling at my clothes as he backed us toward the shower. Once I was naked, I stepped beneath the stream, my eyes never leaving his. Will reached for the hem of his shirt and I stood, transfixed as he revealed his smooth tan skin inch by inch. He'd been half-dressed or completely bare. Every day as we trained for this battle with Charlotte, but I hadn't permitted myself to look at him. Now there was nothing stopping me. When he was naked, he joined me under the hot water, his hands finding me. Immediately, they explored my body like he hadn't already memorized it months ago. I've missed you so much, he whispered against my wet skin. I shook my head and reached for his lips again. I didn't want to talk about yesterday. I didn't want to talk about tomorrow. Both of them hurt too much to think about. All I wanted to do was live in this bubble with him for as long as possible. If this was the last night I'd get with him, I wanted to lock my door and spend it in his arms. Will must have got the message because we didn't talk again after that. Our lips were too busy kissing, our hands too busy touching to worry about. And when he finally pressed me up against the tile wall and slid inside me, I knew then that I loved him too. Just like I knew all the heartache I'd felt in my life would pale in comparison to losing him. Bea, my brother yelled, his voice intruding on my dream. I rolled over in bed as he started banging on the door. My nose bumped into something warm and hard, and I opened my eyes to see Will lying next to me. He smiled, his dimples creasing his cheeks. Bea, Abraham hollered again. I rolled my eyes. My brother is such a cock block. Will's eyes widened before a loud laugh shot out of his mouth. He slapped a hand over his face just as the banging stopped outside. Bea, who's in there? I rolled my eyes harder as I climbed out of bed. Should I hide? Will asked. Does it really matter at this point? I asked as I walked across the room. I didn't want him to see my face because I was too tired to hide how sad I was. It didn't matter if my brother saw me with Will. He probably wouldn't even stay another night. Our time left came down to hours and minutes, and my brother was making me waste them on him. I whipped the door open and speared Abraham with a glare. What do you want? He didn't answer as he took a step forward and looked over my shoulder. Who's in there with you? None of your damn business. What do you want? I heard him laugh, Abe continued, completely ignoring me. He muscled his way into my room despite how I tried to stand my ground. When he finally made it inside, his eyes darted to the bed before they widened. Will, the original werewolf, waved from his spot against the headboard. Abraham. My brother's wide blue eyes swung my way. You've been sleeping with Will this whole time? Yes. Now what do you want? My brother blinked at me slowly, his jaw falling open. Finally he shook his head, his gaze jumping from Will to me and back again. I just came to see if you were awake. I folded my arms across my chest as my temper slowly rose. I am now that you've woken me up. What do you want? Abraham finally locked his gaze on me. We need to discuss something. Can you get dressed and meet me in my office? I glanced toward Will as the anxiety rose in my system. Was this it? Had the bubble already burst? I turned back to Abby. Can't it wait? No. It can't. I'll see you in 5. With one more bewildered glance at Will, he turned around and walked out of my room, closing the door behind him. I watched him go, willing myself to not tackle him from behind and kick his ass for ruining my last morning with Will. When I had myself under control, I turned back around. I guess it's important, I said to the ground. You should go, he said, but the strain in his voice said something else. I took a deep breath and met his eyes. Are you leaving now? I should. My heart leapt into the back of my throat, and I swallowed hard. Abby's expecting me in a couple minutes and I have to get dressed. I won't even have time to say goodbye to you, I continued, my voice rising in pitch as the hysteria rose inside me. Will shook his head and climbed out of bed to pull me into his arms. I don't have to leave right now. I can wait until you get back so we can say goodbye. That last word was so quiet I almost missed it. I stood there letting him hold me for longer than I should have, but I knew. Neither of us wanted to let go. I just didn't know what I was going to do when he let go for